A strange incident that happened a few years back. This is my first time posting on Reddit ever. I just thought I'd share a little experience I had a few years ago with my now ex-girlfriend. I think it happened somewhere around late September. I was taking a night walk, maybe around 2 a.m., with my girlfriend. We explored all kinds of places, from abandoned factory buildings to small paths through some woods. Just exploring all kinds of places that are right around us, but where we haven't really ever been. I live in Finland, and it gets very dark here in the fall. The walk was very romantic in a sense, two young lovers walking around while the town sleeps. Although I did scare her a bit by telling a few ghost stories while we walked, the real creepy thing happened while we were returning home along a normal lit street. We didn't see a single person anywhere while we walked. All the streets and roads were deserted, excluding a few cars that drove by. Then we heard a bicycle. It was as clear as it could get. A bicycle tire on a sandy road coming from behind us. We initially paid no attention to it. We were busy holding hands and talking. But it sounded as if the cyclist was in a hurry. We both stopped talking, as we now heard as if the cyclist was in fact speeding right toward us. Just when it sounded that the bicycle was right behind us, we both quickly turned around to see what the hell was going on. Nothing. It sounded as if the bicycle ran past us, but there was no one there. We were both quite shocked when I turned to her and asked, "Did you just hear a bicycle too?" And she said yes. We walked back home, wondering what the hell had just happened. It was maybe a few months after the incident when I was walking with my father near the same spot. Now, he told me his cousin had died here when he was in his 20s. Apparently, he was riding his bicycle drunk one evening when he cycled under a truck. He probably never even saw it before it was too late. I don't really believe in ghosts, but that sure sent some chills down my spine. It's not the creepiest thing that has happened to me, but I just thought I'd share it. Unexplained voices and sounds in the woods. First of all, apologies if my English is a bit clumsy at times. It's not my first language. I am from Finland, and that's also where these things I'm about to describe to you happened. This was some years ago, pre-smartphone and GPS era. It was the end of the summer, and myself and two friends were on a camping trip way up in the north, in Lapland. The mosquito season was over, and the weather was cooling down in anticipation of the coming fall. The three of us had packed food and gear for a 10-day trek. The car we arrived in had been left at the parking lot of a visitor center. This happened within the premises of Urho Kekkonen National Park, a 985 square mile stretch of wilderness near the Russian border. The terrain there varies greatly, from treeless and semi-mountainous to dense forests of spruce and pine and dwarf birch. There are also lots of swamps. Seeing reindeer is not uncommon, and some nights you may hear wolves in the distance. You can run into a bear or a wolverine in this place, but of course, normally they avoid people. We mostly camped in a tent, but some nights we used shelters and simple huts provided for travelers free of charge. The trip had lasted 5 days, and we were at the furthest of any kind of civilization we were going to be on that particular outgoing. Truly in the middle of nowhere. There really is nothing there. There are no villages, towns, or industry. The place is a national park after all. Seeing other hikers happened from time to time. You'd see some people in the distance maybe. Very rarely would you come face to face with anyone. So, in the middle of our trip, we were camped in a small clearing, woodland extending around us for a considerable distance in all directions. It was already dark, and we had eaten our evening meal, and all three of us were jammed in our only tent. It was a bit cramped, but the tent wasn't too small. We took turns carrying it during the hikes. We were just exchanging some jokes and crude humor in the dark, like guys in their 20s do, about to go to sleep in our sleeping bags. When we quieted down, we began to hear it, talking, and the sound of machinery. Given our location, this was profoundly weird. We camped in a tent because there were no huts nearby. Maybe there was another camp somewhere near us. We couldn't quite make out what was being said, but it was a human voice, no doubt about it. But nothing really could explain the sound of heavy machinery. It sounded like an excavator or a tank, something big, powerful, and not too far away. Combined with the sound of talking, we thought construction yard. But at that time of night, in an unpopulated, protected nature reserve. We got out of our tent. It was cold and pitch black. The campfire had some coals still going. We took out our flashlights. My two buddies have always been a lot braver than me. The sound was clearly coming from the north, maybe 500 to 1,000 meters away. We thought the construction might be going on behind a small hill some distance away. We could see no lights or anything. We still could not make out what was being said. The speaking-like voice was monotonous, and it was impossible even to say what language was being used. Still sounded a lot like a person speaking, though. You may be aware of the sort of spooky phenomenon of hearing a human voice in static. Well, maybe you've used a blow dryer and been sure someone is talking. Turn it off and it was just something the brain tried to interpret from the steady hum. Maybe it was sort of like that. It's hard to explain. The machinery-like sound continued, not loud, and you could sort of make out the powerful engine, at times accelerating, at times at idle. My two friends resolved to go find out what was going on. We put our warm clothes back on, donned boots, and I sat next to the dying fire, adding some more wood to it. I would stay at camp while my buddies left to check out this mystery construction yard in the middle of nowhere in the Lapland woods. So there I sat. The guys took out their maps, took a compass heading, and left, and I could hear them make their way through the forest, see the light from their flashlights. Then they were gone. The weird sounds continued, unaltered. They were gone 15 minutes, then maybe 30, then the better part of an hour. It was odd, judging by the volume of the sound. They should have reached it, checked it out, and been back already. I had more firewood and tried to make out what the person talking was saying, but it was too tiny and obscure. The guys had been away for over 2 hours. Then the sound stopped. Just like that. It just ended, all at the same time. The engine's sound and the voice both just quit. It was very silent. I waited for another 30 minutes, very worried now that something had happened, that maybe my friends were lost. Should I go and try to find them? I shouted their names several times and built the fire pretty big. I was scared shitless when suddenly I saw the flashlight of my friends. Apparently they were returning in a hurry. The guys got back to camp, out of breath. They told me the following. They had followed the sound beyond the small ridge in the distance. There was nothing there, and it seemed like they were not getting any closer to the source of the sounds. They had stopped every now and then, be quiet, and listen to it, to be able to walk towards it. They walked and stopped like this for some time, then realized they were not getting any closer. The sounds did not change in volume at all. They decided to go just a bit further, several times, when suddenly the sound just stopped, like someone pressed a button on a recording. They realized they had been going on for a long time. They were in the middle of the dark woods, alone. They reversed the heading and started back at a brisk pace. Eventually they saw my big-ass fire from the top of the hill and found their way back. The weird thing is, we seem to think the sound stopped at different times. They had been gone 2.5 hours in total. They said the sound stopped at around the hour 15-minute mark after they left, and they started to head back immediately, return trip taking a bit longer even though they kept a good pace. They apparently wandered around a bit. For me, the sound stopped at the 2-hour mark, just 30 minutes before they returned. We did not sleep that night. Nothing more happened on that trip, and we never found out what the weird construction yard-like sound was. When we returned to the visitor center some 5 days later, we asked around, but no one knew of any ongoing construction taking place in the whole national park area. Been bugging me ever since. Sauna Ghost. I live in Finland, and here pretty much every household has its own sauna room. When I was 11 or 12 years old, I started to go to the sauna alone because I enjoyed the peace. One evening, before taking a shower, I went to the sauna. I sat there in my thoughts and enjoyed the warmth, when suddenly I felt knocking under the board I kept my feet on. I got scared, so I lifted my feet on the top board where I sat, and nothing else happened. Some minutes later, I got bored and left the sauna to take a shower. Not going to share the details of that, but I suppose you should know that the door to the sauna was in the bathroom. Anyway, I took a shower, and after I was finished, I took a towel and threw my head down to dry my hair. I stared at the floor first, but then without even thinking of it, I looked at the sauna door, or actually what was under it. I saw a pair of very pale feet. I started screaming and ran out of the bathroom, where I was very afraid to go for at least a year or two. When I was a bit older, I started hearing footsteps in our house in the middle of the night, and every now and then I catch my dog waking up suddenly and staring at nothing. My friends who have been sleeping over have told me about hearing footsteps as well, but my family has never believed me about this. I moved away about a year ago, but whenever I visit my parents I get the strange feeling that someone or something is staring at me. The dark-haired girl and other observations. Hello, fellow Redditors. I apologize in forehand for spelling mistakes. English is actually my fourth language. I am a security officer working in the public transport system of Helsinki, Finland. I mostly work in the metro, also known as the subway or underground systems for some of you, and thus spend my days watching tens of thousands of people moving about their daily routines, and also have access to some of the maintenance areas and tunnels connected to the main lines. This is more of a collection of observations during the few years I have worked here and less of a single coherent story. I generally love to use the dark-haired girl as a prime example of the weird stuff that goes on down here daily, but what has become such a routine observation for us that I really doubt my own sanity after failing to react to such things. My friends always get creeped out when I casually mention stuff I'm about to tell you, but you would also grow accustomed to it and stop giving a damn. We have blamed sleep deprivation, long working hours, absence of natural light down in the tunnels, and whatnot, but still these are things appear to a notable amount of my coworkers. First thing I wish to tell you about are these ghost walkers you have most likely seen if you have ever worked in a major transportation hub. These are the people you see walking with a sort of frozen look in their eyes, in a straight line, and seem to pay no attention whatsoever to their surroundings. The weird thing is that other passengers don't seem to notice them either. That annoying hobo who is always begging money from passengers doesn't even look at him, focusing instead on the person walking behind the ghost walker. You only seem to be able to focus your attention to them for these few seconds it takes for them to walk through one camera monitor or past you in a hallway. Should you start looking for them, you will almost never catch a second glimpse of them. These people are seen routinely walking to closed platforms, and when you reach the platform to inform them that it is in fact closed, they are nowhere to be found. These people also appear on trains that should be empty, like when trains heading to the depot for maintenance very clearly have someone sitting in it, but the train is empty when checked at the depot. This happens so frequently that most of us have adopted, if you think you saw something you did not, the driver will always call if there actually is some hobo or sleeper that needs to be removed attitude, and while we do notice these ghost passengers, we just don't react to them at all. It is very uncomfortable to think that while you sit in that almost empty train during early hours of the morning, the other passengers might not be there at all. Almost all of the underground stations in the Helsinki metro station are doubling as bomb shelters and have some extensive tunnel networks connecting them to other stations, other tunnels, and shelter areas. These areas are rarely traversed by other people than the occasional maintenance guy and us security people. While graffiti artists and other adventurers do enter the dark tunnels by night, they hardly ever get into the maze of bomb shelter rooms and storages, which are conveniently locked behind multiple iron doors with electronic locks. The scariest go and check tasks we get are those of a single alarm going off deep in the maze. You know no one should be there. You know it most likely is just an alarm malfunction, but you still have to check it. You can imagine that these dimly lit, somewhat narrow tunnels that look like a level from Wolfenstein 3D, and as they are carved straight into rock and isolated with concrete and multiple doors, the only noises you hear are your own footsteps. Every chime your keys make in your pocket, the occasional water dripping from the ceiling and wind from the ventilation system. I think I developed a mild form of claustrophobia after checking these tunnels for hours during my career. Back to the point. After seeing weird ghostly people verified to exist by your colleagues, who sometimes even look at the same monitor as you and point them out, it is really unsettling to check virtually unused service tunnels and storage room mazes for sources to yet another weird alarm. Now, for the big story, so to say. The dark-haired girl, referred to as the girl now on. This ghostly figure of a dark-haired girl appears on a single station from time to time, usually for just a few minutes. She always creeps the fuck out of new employees if they are lucky to catch a glimpse. She seems to sit on a bench, waiting for a train to come after traffic has already ended. You see her on a camera monitor, even though you are pretty sure you checked the whole station before locking it up for the night, and that there she is, sitting on a bench. So you start walking there and reaching the platforms. It is always empty. Now the hallway from the control room to the platform has no splits, and should she have run to the tunnels, it would certainly set alarms off. It is very damn creepy. She has been reported by a dozen colleagues, and I am lucky enough to have seen her twice through these years. We tend to have a fascination towards her now. What is her story? Did the girl commit suicide by jumping to the rails? Did she get killed on the way home and now waits for the train she was supposed to take? Is the girl one of the ghost passengers waiting for a ghost train never to arrive? I've been toying with the idea of walking to the platform next time I see her, sitting down next to where her visage is seen on the camera and ask what she is doing there. Here is a photograph from a few days ago, taken by a newer colleague who saw her for the first time. You can see that his hands were shaking from what I suspect is genuine fear and a shitty camera phone. The poor dude was probably more shaken from the fact that we more experienced workers just laughed it off and told him that she is a sort of mascot for the station for us who have seen her. The camera feed is not frozen, like I thought first time I saw her, but on the second time, I am sure the clock and no passengers text on the indicator were moving normally. After a few years in the tunnels, a raging meth-crazed hobo is welcome change from all those weird and unsettling things I'm so used to seeing. The Man from Lake Boone. I live in Finland, so please excuse any minor errors in my grammar. Anyway, in my country there is a relatively famous lake, Lake Boone. It is quite large and extremely deep. A local metal band, Children of Boone, even named themselves after it. The reason for its fame is mainly some murders that took place on the rocky beach a few years ago. Some teenagers went camping and were killed, with only one survivor. Naturally, he was blamed, but insufficient evidence led to his release. There have also been several accounts of people drowning themselves in the lake. I know. It sounds like a setup for a bad horror movie. That's what I thought. So this happened to me a few weeks ago. I was attending a memorial service, which was held in a large house by the lake. It was pretty late, and even though it wasn't dark, it was still very cloudy and gray. We were having a free conversation thing, and I had nothing to say, so I grew bored. I discreetly slipped out of the building, thinking I would take a stroll by the famous lake. As I climbed down the hill that the house was on, I noticed I couldn't see the water. I found this strange, but after I had made it all the way down, I realized that the lake was simply covered by a thin layer of fog due to the weather conditions. I sat there for a while and admired the lake. I was nowhere near the spot where the murders happened, but I could see it from where I was standing. The whole situation had a very eerie vibe to it. At that moment I felt I had seen enough, and prepared to make my way back to the service. As soon as I turned around, I saw it. It was more of a him than it, really, but I couldn't really say where the line is drawn. I mean, it looked like a man, but something about him was just off. I suppose I'll call it a him for now. Anyway, there was a man standing in the woods, a small distance from me. He was no one I knew, and definitely not a guest of the service. He was pale, and had short black hair, and a dark blue dress coat on, but otherwise his clothes were pretty casual. Black jeans, black t-shirt, black shoes, nothing formal though. He was not looking at me, but at the lake. Scared, I beckoned to him, thinking he was just some kind of nature enthusiast. He didn't. He turned to face me, and a wide grin formed on his face. I was very afraid. He hadn't done anything wrong, but something about him was just not right. He was somehow distorted, or his posture was skewed. I can't explain it any better. We stood there for a while, in complete silence, him grinning at me thinking if I should stay or run. That's when he took a step towards me, and another one. His slow approach quickly turned into a brisk walk, and before I knew it, he was right in my face. I was paralyzed by fear, and I thought he was going to murder me, or rape me, or worse. He didn't. He simply walked by me, down the rest of the hill, and straight into the damn water. I never tested it, but the water must still have been really cold in that part of the country. Finland is very cold. If it was, it sure didn't stop him. He was knee-deep before I realized what was happening. I had no idea why he was doing this, but I wasn't going to stay and find out. I made a run for it, stumbling up the hill in pure terror. As I turned toward the lake one last time, I saw his figure, partially engulfed by the fog, waist-deep in the water and still walking. I never told anyone in the house about this because I felt a memorial service wasn't the best place to be telling ghost stories. I've thought about talking about it with my dad, but to be honest, I don't think he would believe me. I've studied the history of the lake, but nothing about this came up. Other than the murders, there are no legends, no myths. I don't know what Reddit will think of my story, but I just wanted to share it. I see dreams about the man. Nightmares. I'll never forget his grin. I am afraid.